very warm welcome to our EVZ conversation panel. Today we're going to discuss sustainable support to Ukrainian civil society in these difficult times of war and in the hopeful times of the eventual recovery. My name is Matthias Nellis and I have the pleasure to guide you through today's session. I worked until the full-scale Russian invasion in Ukraine on communal development in eastern Ukraine and southern Ukraine. And just as many Ukrainians, I had to flee the war but relocated to Germany. And I work for the Deutsche Gesellschaft für internationale Zusammenarbeit. Very few words about EVZ Stiftung. I'm not working for them, but today's session is hosted by them. So EVZ, since 2003, is working with Ukraine, on Ukraine, has supported over 700 projects, some of them with long-standing partners in Ukraine. And as the name Erinnerung, Verantwortung, Zukunft suggests, the foundation is rooted or stands in the past, in the now, and in the future, and is dedicated to supporting the democratic Ukraine, its civil society and society. And EVZ's goals are, of course, to strengthen their partners, some of them caring for the elderly, survivors of the war, and vulnerable groups, such as the Roma, and to make their voices heard. And today's session is exactly about this, about handing the microphone over to some of the affected groups, and this is why I'm so happy to guide us through today's session. Very, very briefly, just to frame today's discussion, and then I will introduce our three very good panelists. Obviously, what I want to emphasize is that the war that many of us here in Germany perceived only this year started 8 years ago. This is something to frame our discussion. The war started in effect in 2014, and 14,000 people until this February, before this February, fell already victims to this war, and 7% of Ukraine's territory was already occupied before the full-scale Russian invasion. And since the invasion, we saw a remarkable resistance of the Ukrainian society, of the state, of the president, of the politicians, but first and foremost of Ukraine's citizens. And some of them are here. So this remarkable resilience is topic of our discussion today, but we also don't want to talk about this resilience. We want to shed light on how German foundations, on how Germany can support civil society, grassroots actors, but also how what they expect from us, from Germany, in the process of the eventual recovery and the EU accession. So having framed that, I want to introduce my speakers. To my right is Anzhelika Bielova, president of the Association for Roma Women, Voices of Romni. And on my left is Petro Rosanenko, producer, actor, and also a Roma activist. And joining us live from Bratislava is Anna Lenchovska, CEO of the Kyiv Educational Center, Tolerspace. So I want to begin maybe with you, Anzhelika, because you had the longest ride. Anzhelika actually came by train and bus from Western Ukraine. So we're going to take 3 inputs, and then we're going to dive straight into the discussion and have room for your questions at the end. So Anzhelika, why don't you kick it off?
Hello, dear ladies and gentlemen. I'm honored to be here today, and I thank you for the invitation to this meeting. I will start to speak about my personal experience and experience of my organization. On 24th of February, I woke up from the words of my husband, "The war has begun." Fighters were flying over our house, and we heard the sounds of explosions nearby. We packed our bags, and we were on our way to Lviv for 2 days. I'm from Zaporizhia originally. It is southeastern part of Ukraine. So on 27th of February, I crossed the border with Hungary with my daughter, with my colleague, and have been living there for past 7 months. Actually, I felt guilty to being safe when hundreds of Ukrainians died every day because of the Russian missiles. Do you know this complex of survivor? I had it. I started doing what I was used to do before the war. I was looking for funding and writing projects, but already for the provision of humanitarian aid for Ukrainians. Before the war, our organization had the basic mission of creating conditions for self-realization and economic security of Roma women and promoting gender equality in Roma community and in Ukraine. And during the 7 months of the war, we provided humanitarian aid to about 4,000 people, medicines, food, and hygiene kits. We provided bread to 1,020 people, to 200 people every day, and our activities cover 4 regions in the east and south of Ukraine, and we are currently expanding our activities in 2 regions in the east and in the western part of Ukraine. So our team has grown and strengthened, and now one of my key priorities it is to support and continue to support my staff, my team, and continue to respond to the urgent needs of the Ukrainians. The main target group of my organization, it is the Roma community, the most discriminated minority group in Europe. So many of them faced discrimination before the war, but martial law further affected their socio-economical situation due to the economical crisis and insufficient education. It is difficult for them to find a job. Displaced Roma face problems with housing. Children do not have access to the technical means due to the gadgets, because until September, education in Ukraine was in distance format, and since September only few schools in safe regions were opened. Roma Ukrainian refugees are segregated in shelters abroad and discriminated at borders. They need systematic support. Their voices must be heard. And I want to say about our secret of Ukrainian resilience. So a lot of colleagues, a lot of friends from other countries often ask me about what is the secret of your resilience. So we were attacked by country 28 times larger than ours, which for many years couldn't release its tentacles from our country, which russified our population and destroyed our culture for centuries. And from the first days of full-scale war, we are called this full-scale war because our war with Russia started back in 2014. The Russians started destroying our homes, killing and torturing our people. Everyone, regardless the age and nationality. See photos from massive mass graves of tortured and murdered Ukrainians in Irpin, in Bucha, and the last recent findings in Izum. We are fighting against a common enemy. We are fighting for our land, for the lives of our people, for the independent, for the future of our children, because we know what it is to be free. We know the taste of free, and unfortunately, its price. And we are ready to pay it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Anzhelika. We'll come back to you in a second, but maybe Petro, why don't you continue with your opening statement?
Yeah, of course. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here today and to share relevant information from the cultural front of my country. My name is Petro. I'm Ukrainian actor, producer, and social activist. Today is the 218th day of the full-scale war that Russia is waging against my country. This reminder telling me of the power and strength of my people. Today the length of the front line is more than 1,000 kilometers. In addition to our territorial borders, we defend our identity, a cultural front that dates back of hundreds of years. For decades, the Russian authorities destroyed Ukrainian culture, banned our language, killed cultural figures, seized our achievements, and erased our identity. I want to draw your attention to those people in my country who have another weapons. Weapons of art and bravery for the good deeds. I have to point out that despite the extremely difficult conditions for people of art, the cultural front continue to impress and initiate its artistic ideas, turning them into projects in public sector, attracting the best specialists. A few days ago, I spoke with my colleague Marina Koshkina. She is a very famous and talented actress in Ukraine, and her initiative completely changed my thinking way about my speech before you. Therefore, I would like to use her example to demonstrate what the cultural front means for me. From the first days of the war, Marina was one of the bright examples in the organizing of humanitarian aids to the victims and aids to the military. In 2022, she founded the charitable fund Ukrainian Art Movement. Despite the fact that this is the very young fund, a huge number of completely different famous Ukrainian artists are involved in this project. All they are united by one important mission: the preservation of creativity and Ukrainian identity in children. According to the latest data from the state portal of the Search for Children, the Russian army killed 385 children, wounded 742, and kidnapped 7,420 children, forcibly deporting them to their country. So far, only 55 children have been returned. We understand that the children of our country, it's our future. The Ukrainian Art Movement Foundation works to provide artistic and humanitarian aids to affected children. Its goals to help children and teenagers develop their creativity potential and desire to engage in art, providing them with all necessary needs, materials for this. In addition to purchase of art supplies, musical instruments, equipment for creativity professions, literature, etc., her foundation, together with the team, works on the art therapy for injured children, has a separate project that involves children in creativity and development, regularly holding master classes in various creative directions, organized art festivals and fairs. The main point is to help children integrate into new reality, new circumstances, and at the same time fill their world with the good and happy childhood. Currently, the Ukrainian Art Movement Foundation works in 4 deoccupied regions that suffered from Russian aggression. I will be honest, helping culture is not the priority for the Ukrainian government now. We understand these priorities, but this doesn't stop our creativity and desire to work for the good for our country. Our military need weapons. We are, and the cultural front needs your attention and your support. I would be happy to invite you to join us because join our initiatives means to support our children, what makes a huge contribution to our culture, to our education, to our public sector. Helping Ukraine and Ukrainians is clearly an investment in our joint victory. Thank you for the opportunity to introduce you to brave Ukrainians. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Petro, for these insights on the cultural front. Yeah? And now, Anna, please, from Bratislava, we're looking forward to your input also.
Guten Tag. My name is Anna Lenchovska, and I lead NGO Kyiv Educational Center Tolerspace. How does it feel for a teenager to live during the war? How could a teacher conduct a lesson when her city is bombed? Nobody could answer those questions. German schools now open their doors for 180,000 evacuated Ukrainian people. Thank you. Since March, our organization has focused our work on young people and teachers. With the support of the EVZ Foundation, we work with teenagers and experts, and together they develop videos about totalitarianism, war crimes, crimes against humanity, about Holocaust survivors who suffered now from full-scale Russian invasion, about human rights during the war. Today, a video of our 14-year-old Yarina about Babi Yar was published and got 55,000 views on our TikTok education channel. Our teenagers try to find answers to non-child questions. Will my friends be dead? Will I be again with my family? Why human freedoms are limited during the war? And where are the red lines for those limitations? What is resentment? Why is it happening now in Ukraine? In order to support thousands of Ukrainian children, we created a support network for hundreds of teachers. We invited Dutch trauma therapists to teach trauma-sensitive approaches. We organized support groups and conducted webinars together with teachers to discuss how they can teach during the war, which methods they can use, how they can support each other in order to support their children and families. Our initiative is a part of Ukrainian civil society, holding balance and responding to growing needs caused by war. Research has shown that during the first 3 months, it was Ukrainian people's unity and solidarity and mutual help let us survive. But the resources of people who lived through the war are not unlimited. Grassroots initiatives in civil society in Ukraine need systematic and holistic support. This should not be only financial. Volunteers and NGOs need psychosocial support, rest and recuperation. Horizontal cooperation in communities needs to be strengthened. It is difficult to build sustainability only on enthusiasm. Support to civil society should gradually move from responding to urgent humanitarian needs to building capacity and providing institutional funding, recovery and recovery processes. The war exhausts resources and emotional capacity. The war isolates. It becomes difficult to find mutual understanding, to solve internal conflicts, to include needs of various groups. So a systematic approach to counter polarization in Ukrainian society, create safe spaces for dialogue. This should be supported. And to rebuild houses and infrastructure, first of all, we need to gather the needs of various members of the community and organize dialogue spaces where they can make joint decisions. How do they see their future? Developers create projects based on the outcomes of such community decisions, not before. And children and youth and vulnerable groups, they should be part of such discussions, and their needs should be taken into account. Thank you very much, and I'm ready for your questions.
Thank you. Thank you for these inputs, and we want to now move to the second block to think a little bit more about the resilience, but then focus on the recovery. And I want to come back to you, Anzhelika. You already spoke about the needs of the vulnerable groups, but maybe you can expand that, like especially when looking at the times of war, but also connecting to the eventual recovery. What are special attention that should, what are the needs of vulnerable groups, and how should we take them into consideration?
Thank you for this question. I want to raise the issue that I see that in many types of assistance, some vulnerable categories of some vulnerable groups, for example, the Roma people, are missing from the target audiences of the humanitarian activities, humanitarian projects, and they become invisible to humanitarian programs because they do not often have access to information, to gadgets, technical means. They live in the settlements, for example, in Zakarpattia region, and live compactly in, for example, in my hometown in Zaporizhia and in different in other regions of Ukraine. And they live in remote areas. So my task on this meeting, in my work, to make their voices heard and ensure their inclusion in social programs. It is very important. And if we are talking about measures in other countries that are aimed at helping Ukrainians, it is important. Please consider the voices of these vulnerable groups and invite various groups, various categories to the discussions, including Roma people who also have Ukrainian citizenship. Because I had an experience to work in different projects. For example, our project with Voice Amplified on shelter assessment in Hungary, and we find out that there is a huge segregation. So if you visited shelters and see Roma people in these shelters, only Roma people, and they are in the and non-Roma people, Ukrainian refugees, have better conditions in the shelters. So it is important to speak with Roma civil society, Roma NGOs, and to include this component on the all levels of, and to discuss it with the decision makers.
Thank you for that. Petra, I want to come to you. You are also, like me, a friend of electronic music, and there was one good example of Ukrainian cultural activities already in recovery. So there's a great initiative where dance and electronic music comes together with recovery. Maybe you can share a little bit about that.
Yes, we have a great initiatives that's let's say popular among the young people especially. That's kind of a rave festival which helping to clean the territory which were suffered by Russian aggression. They are organizing the music, and young people, usually it's attend about 100 young people who is coming to help and to clean the places. That's really great initiatives.
And afterwards, they not just helped to clean the place, destroyed schools, for instance, but they also danced together, right?
Yes, yes.
So that's an example of how something very serious, the recovery, can be connected with something fun. But Petra, why don't you also expand on what you believe, German foundations and Germans should do to keep up this remarkable resilience in times of war? Like what, from a cultural perspective, what you expect from us? You already said priority of the Ukrainian government is not now on culture, understandably, but how can we support actors like you, actors like you described? How can we keep and assist you?
So I'm inspired of the idea that children are our future, and I'm focusing more in that field of art, working with the children to help them to live in the new reality. But yeah, how the Germany can support? Let's say that it's to support our initiatives to find which is more touching you as a foundation and to support these initiatives.
Mm-hmm. That's a very good answer. Anna, I want to bring back you in. You already hinted at something very, very important. When we talk about Ukrainian recovery, we hear in the news the billions of euros that will be needed to destroy the social and the other infrastructure, yeah, and there are already a lot of plans out there to do that. But you touched upon a point to involve Ukrainian society and local actors in the process. And maybe you can expand that a little bit. How can we make sure that the recovery process is inclusive and not just a top-down process?
Thank you, Mattia. I really think that the recovery process should be oriented not only on the past, like what we lost and how it looked like, but it should be oriented in the future. How do we want to live in the future, in 20 years, in 50 years? And actually, children and youth are those people who in 10 years will be voters, and in 20 years they will be working and pay taxes and will be active adults. And it's important that this rebuilding and revival process is also based on their visions of future, including also their needs. And I know some methods as focus groups or mapping of initiatives or gathering, also working with dreams and ideas, because also trauma makes us not dream or isolates us and freezes us, and such activities which help us to rephrase a little bit and to be able to think not only about the past, but to think about the future should be supported. And of course, children and youth are a vulnerable group because often adults say, "Oh, what can you think? You are just a minor." But in 10 years, 20 years, this minor will work and pay taxes and provide pensions with all of this. So they need to be taken into account, and specialists who know how to work with minors, how to map future for communities with minors, they should be invited and supported.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And in Germany, a lot of people were astonished that Zelensky, I think, a few days into the war, announced Ukraine's ambition to join the European Union. Yeah, people here, some of them didn't understand why, when the country is facing such an existential war, they're thinking about the future. And for me, I understood that from day one, because the war is also about the future, as you described. So maybe you can, Anzhelika, talk a little bit about this. How does the grand idea of joining Europe, the European family, joining the European Union, how does it connect with the civil society and your goals and aspirations? How is that important for you?
So this is a question about what will be when we will join EU.
And on the process, what it means for you.
Okay, so I am pretty sure, and our way to EU started in 2014, I think. And how I see it as a student, I was really happy from my students years, because our way to European Union is it was a development and creating a safe space for different groups of people. And our civil society became so strong for these 8 years. And I love my job. And I had so much opportunities, and also I have so much opportunities to protect Roma rights in Ukraine. And for example, we created 1 year ago the second Roma strategy for supporting Roma people in Ukraine, and it is a huge national program. And it consists, there is a questions of documents, of education, of social services, and different, and for inclusion processes, and different important issues only for Roma minority in Ukraine. And I'm really proud for my country that we choose this way. And I think the future of Ukraine in European Union, it is a bright future, and we are already ready for this, and our civil society is very strong. But I want to mention again that we need help of other European countries, because now we are fighting with our enemy, and it will be our joint victory. And on this point, I want to say that today, of course, the most important part that will help us to defend our common enemy, it is weapons, military equipment, and ammunition. And German foundations can help us to talk about it on the different levels and in different forms, and reach decision maker at higher levels, because we just want to defend Ukraine from attack. We don't need foreign territories. We want to defend our territories and return the already occupied ones. And then I think we will have a bright future together. Thanks.
Thank you. This is, I think, a very important point. Here we are, grassroots activists demanding, calling for weapons. Yeah, who would have thought that this would be the case in peaceful times? But Anna, maybe you can also pick up this point. Of course, the European future is far away, and to get there, the war has to be ended. The war has to be won from a Ukrainian perspective. It has to end on Ukrainian terms. But why don't you also pick up the idea on the role of civil society in joining Europe? What is, you think, the role of local civil society, of children? How can we ensure that the process is not just elite-driven Brussels, Kyiv, but how can we ensure that local voices are heard in this process?
Yeah. I can answer this question right now, because right now I am in Bratislava. We participate 7 years in a Stories That Move network. That's the best anti-discrimination education platform that unites 7 European countries. And with the support of EVZ Foundation, participation of Ukraine was possible because EU grant only covered participation of members of EU. But due to the support of EVZ Foundation, Ukrainian teachers, Ukrainian educators would participate not only in working with the platform, but we created the platform, and now since 7 years we are improving it, and we are thinking about scaling and working with other target audiences. So we are already in this process. And also what the differences that I see working with Ukrainian teachers, and especially young people, they are already valuing freedom and democracy very much. That are their basic values important for them, to agree how to do something, to respect someone's right to be different. And of course, the war challenges diversity, and the war challenges democratic practices. Some of them are limited also during the war because of security issues. But I think that this core is already going throughout Ukraine in civic education initiatives and work with young people. And actually, civic education now, it is not just something provided by informal organizations, NGOs. It is part of the program. There are full books from 1st to 11th form, and I know with teachers with whom we work that those topics are now extremely popular among 16, 17 years old. For topics of democracy, topic of human rights, topic of identity, gender identity, those issues are now relevant for them. So I think that we are on the way.
Thank you. And just today, another Ukrainian civil society activist received the alternative, or it was announced that Alexandra Matvichuk received the alternative Nobel Peace Prize. So this is also some very pleasant and important news to keep, it's a human rights activist with Center for Civil Liberty. So it's important to keep Ukraine and Ukraine's endeavors to end this war on our mental map. And Petro, of course, it's a little bit ironic. Here we are speaking about the future, about the European accession of Ukraine, but of course the war is still continuing. And you are originally from the Donbass, from Donetsk, so looking kind of forward into the next months, yeah, into the next year maybe. What are your hopes and expectations to share to the German audience? What do you expect? How are you looking into the next months ahead?
Well, as I mentioned in my speech, that Russian authorities killed our culture during hundreds of years. And let's say about my expectations that there is the time for the Ukrainian culture to raise the voice, to be heard from the Europe, and to identify as a Ukrainian culture. And my let's say expectations, it's the opportunities for the Ukrainian culture for the next time.
To be heard. And maybe before we open to the audience, I'm sure some of you will have specific or general questions or comments. I want to collect also from you and from Anna, the demands or hopes, just to conclude our session. So what are you both hoping and demanding from us, the German partners of Ukraine, for the recovery or for the immediate next few months?
Okay, so we can hope for a better, yeah, but we have to prepare for difficulties, and I think we will have difficult situation this winter because Russians started to attack our different power plants and plants for heating, and we will have a difficult times in winter for Ukrainians. And I want to say that Ukrainians still need humanitarian aid now, and it will be great again to mention that it is important to include the needs of vulnerable groups as Roma people to humanitarian programs. And also, I want to say that it is important to support local organizations. And it is my I want to raise this issue with you, with German foundations, because I see that the huge funds of many international funds go to large national organizations, and a large part of this fund are spent on administration, and local organizations often receive like small subgrants or in-kind assistance at all, and do not receive salaries. So support those who are working on the ground, local organizations. They are ones who make change. And also support our activists in Ukraine. I received a scholarship in EVZ Foundation, and I know how it is important for me as a refugee in another country. But I want to say that it is important to support also Ukrainian activists, because they are still in Ukraine and they relentlessly help the population and continue to raise socially important issues. They are the same heroes as our defenders, as our soldiers, and just look at our activists from Kharkiv, who 2 days ago held a pride in the subway in a city is constantly under the fire from the Russia side. Thanks.
That's wonderful, and thank you so much for raising these important points, especially regarding winter, because in Germany we don't have it so present, but millions of Ukrainians rely on external heating systems, which the Russians have already repeatedly targeted. So this is some very important point that the German government is preparing for, but questions, and I hope the German foundations can support the Ukrainians' needs in this cold winter that is coming. That is a very, very important point. And Anna, maybe you can also articulate your kind of summarizing your demands to the German side, to the German foundations, when it comes both to the winter or to the recovery, and then we'll wrap it up and give the audience an opportunity to ask their questions.
Thank you. I would like to ask German government to provide a weapon for our army to defend our country and to liberate our cities as quick as possible, because Russian occupation is one of the most horrible occupations that can happen. What civil society can do in German foundations? I would like to ask you for. I'd like to ask support for local civil society, at least support what Anzhelika just said, and psychosocial rehabilitation programs, maybe short-term programs, but for us to keep this energy to be recharged and to be able to live through. Also, we need support for anti-polarization activities, for spaces where people can talk to each other in a safe manner and decrease this level of tension. Also, we'll need help of healing our wounded civilians and severely suffered civilians from occupied territories. Perhaps you can help them with German medical aid. And also, I would like to strengthen that Ukrainians who are now in Germany, thank you so much for accepting our compatriots, but they are evacuated, so they are not refugees, and that's different. They are temporarily in Germany, and they hope to come back. So that's why very important is connections, meetings, and also opportunity for some Ukrainian teenagers to continue study in Ukrainian schools. So if such meeting spaces and programs could be supported, it would be really great. And also informal meetings with German peers would be also great for Ukrainian evacuated teenagers. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And that's another very important point that raises questions about our own understanding of integration of those fleeing the war. Are our models based on integrating them into the society as close as we can, or how can we adapt to the idea that Anna raised, or the demand that the Ukrainians hope and demand to return to their homes soon. So how can we ensure that they keep the links with their homeland? And many of those, I think we had heard the number of 180,000 children, they now attend both schools, German schools during the day and Ukrainian schools online kind of in the afternoon or in between. So this kind of situation puts an enormous stress on the children. And another point that you raised there, I want to emphasize before opening the floor, the occupation regime of the Russian that is affecting millions of Ukrainians today. And as I said earlier, 20% of Ukrainian territory is still occupied. And people are going through a lot of terror and death, torture, and worse things as we speak. So this raises the question when we hear in discussions Ukrainians should just accept the loss of some territory, then, as we heard today, no. The loss of territory means the continuation of the terror that we know is happening today. But that's a lot that we have said and gathered. I'm very happy to continue, but I want to give you in the audience the opportunity to ask questions to our panelists in Bratislava or to our Ukrainian panelists here on the panel with me. So I think we have a microphone, I think in the floor, yeah, on the floor. So if you are courageous enough, just step forward and address the panel. While you can gather your thoughts, and while you do, I just want to make one more example. We heard about the role of local civil society, and this again raises the question whether German foundations and the German government have the sufficient instruments to help them. Because the large funds, as Anzhelika said, are directed towards the big institutionalized organizations in the bigger cities. And the question is also, how do we make sure that the funds arrive to the local change makers, right? And I was just a few days ago speaking to humanitarian activists who were during the height of the siege of Mariupol, the genocidal siege of the port city in Donetsk. They were smuggling in humanitarian aid, bribing Russian soldiers to let through humanitarian aid. And this is an example of how flexible sometimes local change makers can be to get their aid delivered, right? But we can't rely on that indefinitely. So I don't see any questions from the audience. So Petr, we have already reflected a lot on German contributions, and we've articulated some of the very specific demands, but I said it's important to keep Ukraine on the mental map of Germany, yeah, because we're looking now at a cold winter, not just in Ukraine, but also in Germany, and the question will be, will our support get weaker for Ukraine? And a kind of question to you, but also to the other panelists, is like, what can Ukraine do to keep up the support? How can cultural actors ensure that the support in Germany, the support in the West does not diminish? How do we ensure that we keep this support? Petr, what do you think?
Let's say that our cultural activists and activists from the civil society, they are motivated to do something, to receive any support and to make a contribution to the culture and civil society as well. Yeah, I'm facing difficulties to answer on this question. Maybe my colleagues could help me.
Anzhelika, what do you think?
Thank you. I want to say that our local organizations is very strong, and a lot of them have like public reports on their activities, and you can see, and every foundation can see a huge number of different networks of local organizations. And for example, I'm just one activist from Ukraine, but I know more than 100 women's organizations, human rights organizations, local organizations in Ukraine, in whole Ukraine. So you can contact for one local organization and you can receive a lot of information about needs of vulnerable groups or of their target audience of this organization. We can provide you a lot of information and show you how we can work on the ground.
Thank you. And I think a recent poll showed that about 70% of Ukrainians are now engaged in voluntary activities in one way or the other. So this is an immense mobilization. But Anna, I want to direct the question to you as well. We have change makers in the audience, change makers who will listen to this video. And how can we make sure that they are also empowered to keep up the support for Ukraine, to keep up the high level of support that we still see in Germany, despite growing costs for the Germans? What are kind of your messages to these change makers?
I think that our power is that we are all different, and we have each of us has private contacts, and also I have contacts with German journalists and other colleagues also. So just continue and don't be shy. Inform about your activities and find these points of mutual interest. Also, for it to be a meeting of equal parties, even if one party now is in the war, but we are fighting and we are doing everything what depends from us to fight and to defend our country and to defend European values. So if you can be together with us, that would be really great, and we will finish it quicker.
That's an excellent point. Still, if you, this will be one of the last chances. If you have questions, just step forward and address them. If not, we will slowly but surely wrap up. But Petro, maybe some concluding thoughts on the role of local civil society, or role of local cultural actors in making sure the war ends as soon as possible.
We are on the step of surviving of our organization, of our culture. I see that you're ready to ask the question. Yeah, we are open. We are open to any initiative. We have already a lot of initiatives. We just need to support for it, and just, yeah, we are ready to that, to get it.
That's a great call for action, and there is one courageous soul, so please, if you could introduce yourself also, that would be nice. Thank you.
Yeah, hi, I'm Maria Exner. I'm a former journalist, and I'm building a house for journalism and the public sphere in Berlin that's initiated by the German Foundation. And thank you very much for being here and sharing your experience and your work and being with us. I think that's very important to have you among us in this conference. And a question that I have in regards to the work with children that I understood that all of you do in different contexts. I know that one of the big structural problems of Ukraine before the war is a very widespread system of corruption. And I think if we are talking about the recreation of the country and the rebuilding of the country, I'm just wondering how you think in terms of education and you know, kind of building up the courage of the next generation, how anti-corruption measures are part of your thinking and a part of what you think civil society can make a contribution. Because I think if we're talking about funding and continuous funding from the European Union and you know, national and international actors, I think being able to answer to questions around corruption is going to be a really, really big issue for Ukraine in the post-war area. Thank you.
Excellent question and concern. I think all of us should address this. And maybe, Anna, you go first. You heard the concern about corruption and reconstruction. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, already for this 7 years, anti-corruption education is included into program of Ukrainian schools, and colleagues NGOs, Transparency International, for example, and other also Ukrainian NGOs who were dealing with that, they have developed really great games for small children, also different instruments that can be used with teacher and students at school, and also this reform of our education and reform of our medical system are slowly getting rid of corruption, getting rid of paying for your notes, for example, at school, or someone doing your homework. That's already not okay. And I think that if we continue it, we need to continue, and we need to fight for transparency and to control governments, to control authorities on how they spend money, because it's money for us, it's money for our children and for our future, and that's our task to control it. That's it.
I'm gonna add from my perspective, we are working with the children to develop their creativity, to open their minds. So that's also an important part, to work with the young people and teenagers and children.
Yes, thank you for this important question. And I want to say that this is one of the first questions and the first issues which will, if we solve this issue, we will have the opportunity to be part of EU, as actually mentioned Ursula von der Leyen. And I want to say that our civil society now is very strong, and there is a lot of different cases of corruption even in the time of the war, but our civil society now is too strong and to join to give them opportunity to do this. And I think we will fight and with this issue too.
And on that point, it's my favorite topic, corruption. So it's one of the it's a stereotype, like Ukraine is so corrupt. Yeah, there's a grain of truth in that. So very small comment from my side on that, because I was researching anti-corruption efforts in Ukraine for the past 8 years. And it's remarkable what progress has been achieved, especially when you talk about the institutional landscape combating corruption. Yeah, so happy to talk about all of that with greatest passion after our session. But I wanted to say that even for EVZ, I was involved in an initiative for anti-corruption Stadtführung, guided city tours. Yeah, so the energy, this is what fascinated and actually drew me to Ukraine, is not the problem that is prevalent in Romania, Bulgaria, and elsewhere in the Balkans and so on, also in Hungary and in Germany. We also have some problems with corruption, but it's the energy of the Ukrainian civil society in combating corruptions. And there are great initiatives already on the national level, just last sentence, stepping out of my role as a moderator here, but there are ideas out there how to prevent corruption in the recovery process. So the ideas from the Ukrainian civil society are very clearly articulated, and through mechanisms, oversight mechanisms, involvement of transparency and others. So I'm very happy to share even some documents on that. So civil society from day one has been involved on planning for the recovery and how to avoid that any single Western cent is stolen. But that's another topic for a whole new discussion we can and should have. So I'm looking if is there any other urgent questions from the audience? If not, then eyeing at the end, Petra, you already had a small closing remark. Do you, Anna or Anzhelika, do you want to have any last thoughts before we wrap up?
Yes, I just want to say that it will be our joint victory, and we are on the right side of this story. And I want to ask you to support Ukraine and to be on our side, and it will be our joint victory.
Thank you. And Anna, your thoughts.
Yeah, I will add that yes, we need victory and we need to win quickly, but also what we need is transitional justice, recovery process. So it will be a long, long way, but I hope for future and for good future for all of us, and for Ukraine to be a part of European Union. Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you to the panelists, and thank you to the audience for listening to us for about 60 minutes. So I would say that we'll call it a day, and yeah, thank you for keeping Ukraine on the agenda. And if you have any further questions, we stand ready to be approached after the panel. Thank you so much.